Greetings everyone. Welcome to this new entry in the Introduction to Oil Painting the Landscape series. So if you haven't seen the past videos in this series, just go on through. At the beginning of every month, I post a video that is about 10 to 20 minutes long, and it deals with a short, concise, easy to digest lesson for basically all of you who are brand new to oil painting. So go back and start watching part 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Today, we're going to go over basically a really kind of important thing, which is to identify common mistakes, figure out if you're making any of these mistakes yourself, and to correct those mistakes. So in the past lessons, we've gone over palette, all of the stuff you need to know, colors, brushes, all of that kind of stuff. We've even painted a little simple landscape with a sky and grass field. So I've gone over just the very basics for applying oil paint, how to handle the oil paint, what materials to use and whatnot. So today we are going to go further, and I'm just going to kind of demonstrate and talk a little bit about common mistakes. So the first thing is, the most common mistake for people when they're just starting out and they're having trouble with the oil paint is either painting too thick or too thin. So usually what this entails is the most common thing I see is people not painting with enough paint. So they'll squeeze out that much white and then they'll thin it and they'll try scrubbing the paint, or they won't thin it. They'll just try grabbing a little bit of white and a little bit of blue, and then they're trying to come in and they're painting the whole painting with a scrubby, washy look. Or you're coming in and right off the bat, you're just painting way too thick. You're putting all this thick paint up there that's difficult to manage. So the best consistency for paint, you're going to really learn this by just watching my lessons when I paint. You'll see how I'm applying it. Usually I thin the paint out a little bit, but I still use thick paint, but I thin it. And then I scrub it in like that so I can cover sorry, I'm in the way of the camera there. I scrub it in like that so I can cover a big area, right? So if you're having trouble managing your paint, go ahead. If you're an all access member, when it's time for the art critiques, you can go ahead and send me an image of the painting you struggled with, and I'll let you know what I think if your paint consistency is off. Another thing too is this kind of ties into the painting too thick or too thin, but a lot of times people are taught incorrectly to use a lot of medium, like oil, walnut medium, liquid, whatever it is, any type of additive oil. You don't even really want to dip into that stuff until your second layer. If you're an alla prima painter, which means you're doing your paintings in one sitting and you're not layering, there's no reason really for you to use oils. Some people will use oils in the darks to keep them glossy, but you don't even have to do that. You can just make sure you varnish the painting after. All right, so second, a common mistake I see, using either too small or too large of a brush. So a good rule of thumb is you can use small rounds. I mean, I use them all the time. But for small paintings, right, you don't want to use basically a size, this is a size 4 round. Here, I'll show you on the palette shot up close. So that's what a size 4 looks like. Not very big. It's a very small brush, even though it's a size 4. So I can work on a small painting like this with a brush like this, but any larger and you have this whole painting. So a good size brush for about this size canvas is this, which is a size 12 filbert. All right. This will help you during the block-in cover a lot of area quickly, right? And in general with brushes, you want to move from a large brush at the start to a small brush for the finish. Using a larger brush at the start allows you to avoid over detailing things, and it helps you to simplify. All right, so the other thing, I've talked about this in the color mixing series that I did, people mixing too much white into all the paint, all right? I see this all the time. So if you have paintings where the color just looks chalky to you and you're not getting that saturation, 9 out of 10 times, that is because you're using too much white, all right? As you add white to cadmium lemon or any paint, you tint it, and then with the higher the tint, the higher the key, you begin to desaturate that color. All right, now there are colors that have what's called a high tinting strength. You may have heard that term. And what that means is that like a phthalo blue has probably the highest tinting strength. You can mix a little tiny bit of phthalo blue in a pile of white and it'll create a really vibrant high key blue. All right, but if you take a color with a low tinting strength, like cobalt violet, that's a great example. If you were to take cobalt violet and even mix just a teaspoon of white in it, you dull that color out, right? It turns into a chalky mess. So colors with low tinting strength, you want to use those basically straight out of the tube. So you'll see a lot of painters using cobalt violet for like, when they're using cobalt violet, they're almost using it pure. All right, because if you tint it, you're ruining that color. But you use colors that are synthetics that have a high tinting strength, generally like, you know, alizarin, permanent, and phthalo blue, and just those kind of colors. Prussian blue has a high tinting strength. Those are colors that you can generally mix a lot of white in. All right. Number 4 is not focusing on simple shapes. All right, so today I actually picked a photograph that I'm going to work from. Let me clean this off. I can just tone the whole paper blue, actually. So I've pulled up a photograph that I took out here. And it's basically a photograph of just, you know, a grassy field with some distant hills and then some big rising storm, kind of stormy cumulus clouds. When you're starting out, a lot of people would have the tendency to come in and really spend a lot of time at the start getting all the detail in, when at the start you should just be worrying about the shape, the big shapes, all right? So I'm actually going to start for the drawing with the smaller brush, and then when I do the block in, I'll move to the larger brush, but I'm treating this like a pencil right now. So with the big shapes, you generally want to think, all right, first up, there's 2 rectangles in the landscape. There's the land and then the sky. So if you have your horizon up here, you have a big rectangle here and a small kind of rectangle for the sky. And if you have the sky taking up most of the composition, you have a tiny little slim rectangle down here and a big one for the sky. So you got to find that shape first. I'm going to put my horizon low. So this rectangle represents the land. And then this rectangle represents the sky. And from there, right, I have to figure out the composition. So there's another kind of shape here that's a simple shape that kind of goes down like that, and that's going to be the grassy field. So I'm just abstracting everything. There's a shape here where there's like some tall grass coming and it gets smaller, and there's a fence line right here. So there's a line that goes here. So now we have sort of a triangle here and then a triangle here, all within this larger rectangle, right? And then from there, in the sky, I have a big rectangle, or not a rectangle, I'm going to simplify the shape of the cloud here. So let's say I have this cloud, and I'm not doing any detail right now. I'm just going to come in and simplify the cloud shape. There's kind of one here. All this without using a pencil, right? So that's the basic abstract design. That's how all your paintings should start, right? Especially if you're a beginner. Even though I do a pencil drawing, when you're on a lot of my work, that's just because I'm kind of more advanced. But for those of you that are beginners, I'd like you to do both. I'd like you to do some paintings where you do all of this simple kind of shape building with your pencil, and then also get used to doing it with just the paintbrush. So buy a round, a size 4 or 2, and use it like a pencil, and just get used to doing an underdrawing in paint like this, because it's actually going to help you get better at handling a small round brush for detail. All right, I know I'm kind of running all around the place. So now, how would I proceed from here? Well, I don't want to, number one, start with too thick or too thin paint. So what I'll do is I'll grab white, and I need to paint all the blue sky around where the white clouds are going to go, right? So the last thing on the list, common mistakes, is number 5, not paying attention to the tone, that means how dark or light the actual color shape is, and painting everything either too saturated or too dull. So you have to look at the sky, right? And you have to decide, is this sky vibrant blue or is it grayed down? Well, when I look at this, I see something in the middle. So then I would test it out. I would go blue, maybe add a little yellow, because I know the sky is not pure blue because it's not that saturated. So toning down a color means you're taking a vibrant, pure color and you're generally adding its complement to it. So if you're going to tone down blue, you add orange. If you're going to tone down yellow, you add, purple, sorry. If you're toning down red, you add green. So you test out the color first. And now, in the beginning, I want you, if you're a beginner oil painter, to try to match colors, all right? You'll hear a lot about, like, if you're an impressionist, you don't have to paint the exact color. That's okay, but not if you're learning how to paint. If you're still in the first 2 or 3 years of being an oil painter, you need to get good at actually painting what you see. You can't just skip that step and expect to become a great abstract or impressionist painter. You have to first develop the ability to paint accurately. So notice how this blue is a great, slightly grayed down blue, as opposed to white and pure blue. That would be too vibrant, right? Something like that is way too vibrant blue. It doesn't fit the color. It's not the right tone and saturation. So another thing to remember with skies, the blue sky gets grayer towards the source of the sun or towards the horizon. All right. And if there's atmosphere, notice in the photograph, the blue sky over here has got a lot more particles in the air, so it warms up and it gets hazy and picks up some more gray. Up here in the corner, it's more of a blue. So you have to really pay attention to the subtle shifts like that. So to paint that, I can add a little bit of red and yellow into the blue over here and create that kind of hazy look. I'm exaggerating everything in this lesson just to kind of demonstrate to you. That's probably a little bit too much, but all right. So now I've simplified that entire shape of the sky into one shape. And then if I were to paint, grab a smaller round. If I were to paint the white clouds now, what I would do, is grab white and a touch of orange in it. You want to generally avoid using pure white, especially at the start. Believe it or not, these white clouds, even though they look like white, they're not white. they're actually off-white, which means they're kind of more of an orange or a grayed down white. So if I were to paint these clouds, I would simplify the entire shape of the clouds. Just paint this white shape up here. And just simplify all this as one white shape. And then I can paint into that white shape. So as these clouds get lower, they get more orange. So down here, the white part of the cloud picks up more of that orange. So I'm just simplifying everything, right? Now, if you look at this cloud, there's a shadow on the cloud too. So you've got to simplify your shadows as well as the light part. So on this cloud, there's a shadow here. It kind of comes down there, and then that shape comes down there, and so on and so forth. And you see what I mean? You start with the simple shapes. You start thinner, not too thin and not too thick. You start at just this consistency where it's easy to spread the paint around, but you're not piling the paint on so much that it just makes it unmanageable. When you keep the paint thinner like this, then it's easy to build the shapes within it. Because there's not a lot of white up here, I can just come in over the top and start to paint into the wet paint like that and build up the shadow shapes on the clouds, right? This is called modeling. If all of this was thick white paint, it would be really difficult. Every time I put a brush stroke down, my brush would get all this white paint on it and it would just start making a mess. So that's why we have to watch the consistency of the paint. All right. So let's see. Next up. I'm not going to obviously paint this entire painting because this isn't a lesson like that. This is just a lesson on common mistakes. So let's show the block in. So there's a kind of more of a purple down here. So the key to painting in oil paint is being really observant of the tone and the shape and the color, how saturated, how dark, and the actual shape of each part of the painting is, right? So here on the underside of this cloud, there's like a shadow right there. There's like a dark cloud that comes up there. This is all super rough. I know I keep saying that, but I don't want you to think I'm trying super hard here because I'm not planning on turning this into a real painting. So I just want to go quickly. So I'm moving quickly. I'm using a larger brush and I'm blocking in the shadows. I'm squinting my eyes. I see a shadow here. I see a shadow here, comes down. I'm not even worried about the color so much as how light or how dark each shape is. Color is the last thing that you can change. It's easy to change. As long as you didn't paint everything too thick, you can easily adjust the color. See this shadow shape here? If I want to adjust that color, I can just add a little red and white and yellow. If I want to warm up that shadow, I can just come right in and adjust it. Whoop. And warm it up. See? You can always adjust the color later. The most important thing is to think about how light or how dark and the shape of each element. So that should be all you're thinking about during the beginning of your painting, right? The other thing with the saturation, notice this green field. If I just mix up a bright green, it's going to be way too acidic, right? That is not in the tone of the rest of the painting. This does not look like real nature. Real nature is not acidic and bright like that. If the sky has all this grayed down kind of tone in it, then I need to gray down the grass. Grass is always going to have a certain amount of red in it, right? There's a distant hill back here. And there we go. That's just a basic kind of thing. I can add some orange down here. And there you go. Just a very basic breakdown of how to start an oil painting. Now, when you're looking at this, you're probably saying, oh my God, that looks terrible. It's all just, it's not coming together. Well, that's because in the beginning, if you're doing things right, it shouldn't look great until you're getting towards the last 10%. A lot of you are concerned with, you want it to look good right away. And so you're coming in and you're starting maybe right up here and you're trying to finish this cloud before you've painted the rest of the painting. In order to get everything keyed in right, you have to start moving on. You can't worry about the detail. Block in the whole painting, keep everything simple, and then I can come in and I can start adjusting the shapes and moving things around and then making it look real, right? So it's just a process. Down here, I can carry the blue sky down. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, I could spend all day on this, refining it and starting to make it look real and real and more real and more real. It's just a matter of how far you want to take the painting. When you start abstract and kind of loose like this, with just big, simple shapes of color, you're able to kind of move through the painting abstractly and decide how much finish you want to give it. I could turn this into a photorealistic image just from this simple underpainting, or I could just mess with things a little bit and leave it really abstract, right? I could darken some things here and I could keep everything very abstract. It's just a matter of how far you want to take your painting, right? That's all personal taste. All right. Hopefully you guys learned something today. If you have any questions, please let me know. One of the most important things when you're a beginner oil painter is to just start putting the paint on the canvas. Don't overthink it. The best thing you can do is start 100 paintings, even if you don't finish them. Just getting to this point where you just block everything in really quick and get it, just kind of rush through it. It'll get you better at painting. They're not going to look good. You're going to do probably 100 before it starts to look good, but just doing it over and over again, maybe do 2 a day, spend 15 minutes on each one. So 30 minutes a day. Just if you get home from work and you got a little bit of free time, buy that oil paper from Arches Oil Paper. You can buy it on Amazon. Just buy that. Have 2 sheets ready with your palette when you get home and just boom, block in a simple little image like this. All right, thank you so much.